Welcome everyone to the program today. Very glad to be here to have our team and other partners in Katowice, Poland, ready to share what they've seen in COP24. We have several participants here today who have been introducing themselves as we've joined in. It's been very exciting to see people joining from Canada, Kenya, Belize, the United States, Italy, Peru, and Pakistan. That doesn't cover everyone, but it does show some of the diversity that we have here on the call with us today. So thank you, those who are in attendance. Thank you so much for joining us. We are joined today by Tomas Insua, Executive Director here at the Global Catholic Climate Movement, Father Jostrom Kuriatatum of the Vatican Dicastery for Integral Human Development, who is just off frame now, and Julia Bondi from the Climate Desk for SIDSI, our partners in Europe. So welcome all of you, thank you. And it appears that we have a special guest joining us from the Philippines. So Tomas, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, so this is a last minute addition. We just run in the COP corridors. I just run into Joanna, who some of you might remember because of the webinar for the 5th anniversary of Haiyan, right?
Oh, yes.
So some of you, those of you who attended the webinar about the 5th anniversary of Typhoon Haiyan, you might remember Joanna, who is a survivor of that tragic super typhoon that hit the Philippines in 2013. And Joanna is one of the climate pilgrims. You might have been following the climate pilgrimage that Yevsanyo and other wonderful pilgrims have been doing from the Vatican to Katowice, to Poland. It was 2 months walk. And well, Joanna was one of the pilgrims. So we thought it would be nice to start with Joanna's testimony. The question would be, so before we run into the rest of the program of what's going on here at COP24, I thought it was, God just put Joanna in front of me and reminded me we are missing the most important voice, which is the voice from the communities in the ground that have been the most affected by climate change, by the injustice of climate change. So Joanna, if you could share a little bit about the climate pilgrimage and why have you all been walking from the Vatican to Katowice? What's the message that you're bringing?
Are we, is Father Jostrom also opening us with prayer, or will Joanna be starting first?
Actually, thank you for the reminder, Marisa. We're actually starting with prayer, as usual.
Yeah, so Father Jostrom, if you could.
Let's begin with a very simple prayer. Aware that, as the Psalm 126 says, if the Lord does not build a house, in vain do the builders labor. So all our efforts need to be sustained by the grace of God. Just this afternoon at 3 o'clock, we had a meeting with the COP24 President, Minister Kurtyki of Poland, and we asked him what he wants from the church. And the first thing he said, prayers. We want spiritual support. So let's provide the spiritual support to the entire COP community here, a group of over 32,000 people. Let's pray as the Bible prays, as the Psalm prays, Lord, send forth your Spirit and renew the face of the earth. As we know, the earth is crying out. Climate change, pollution, water scarcity, biodiversity loss, and so many manifestations of the cry of the earth. And we know along with the earth, the poor are crying out. And as Pope Francis prayed in Laudato Si, we pray to you, O God of the poor, hear the cry of the earth and hear the cry of the poor. And we ask you to send forth your Spirit, especially on the political leaders who are assembled here at the COP24. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow are going to be very, very crucial days, that they may really come out with the Katowice Solidarity Accord, being one as a human family to take care of our common home. And we ask you, Lord, send forth your Spirit into the hearts of all of us, especially of the delegates who are negotiating these days. Illumine their minds, enable them to be generous, to have the wider picture, to see the entire world as a common home, to perceive themselves as members of the common human biotic family, and to be generous and to preserve this beautiful common home for everyone on earth, especially for the future generations. We make this prayer to your Father in the Holy Spirit through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. So the floor is yours, Joanna.
Okay, so the message that the climate pilgrimage brings is a message of climate justice. So it is seeking for a chance to not let tragedies like Super Typhoon Haiyan happen again and again in the future. We also bring the message of Pope Francis from his encyclical Laudato Si on our care for our common home. The climate pilgrimage has journeyed from Rome to Katowice for 65 days across 6 countries. And I actually joined the last bit of the pilgrimage from Czech Republic to Poland. And my reason for joining the climate pilgrimage is to bring the stories of my community back home in Tacloban, Philippines, to the global platform. Because when Super Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines 5 years ago, it claimed more than 10,000 lives, displaced millions in just 2 hours. And I lost my parents, my eldest brother, my sister-in-law, and my 3-year-old nephew during that storm. Personally, it has been my mission to share the story of our community because the storm may have taken everything away from us, but we gained a powerful story to tell that could humanize the numbers and the statistics, the abstract concept of climate change. And hopefully, with these powerful stories that we carry with us, hopefully we can influence our world leaders to decide with their hearts.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing and sharing your powerful testimony. So, these stories the climate pilgrims have brought forward are in the hopes of motivating world leaders, and we know we have a far way to go. And so I invite Julia Bondino, if you could share the state of COP24 and what we expect to see.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. So today is the 12th of December, and you might remember that 3 years ago, on the 12th of December, the Paris Agreement was adopted. 3 years now, and the change, the world is not anymore as it was.
Speak up.
Yeah,
Okay.
or lean in here.
Okay. So the world has changed since 2015. We see populism rising up. We see nationalism. We see that the concern of climate change is not anymore a priority for world leaders. So what is happening here? 3 years after the Paris Agreement, now countries have to agree on the so-called rule book, which is a set of rules that are going to help guide in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. These rules are very important. These rules are very important because they need to put in action the commitments of countries, that the pledges that they made in Paris, but also they must be step up. So it's important that these rules are done in a way that equity, responsibility, that justice are at the center. So in a few words, what's at stake at the moment? We have on the one hand the need for a robust rule book that can help countries in raising the ambition of the NDCs, so the national pledges, and these must be yes, I'm sorry. And these these NDCs must be announced by 2020. Another important point is about the finance. As usual, finance is always a crunchy issue, and especially for developing countries, because developing countries want to see the commitment of developed countries, the commitment of the 100 billion by 2020, and also they want to see predictability of finance, meaning that information is shared beforehand to developing countries on the amount of finance, and it's very important that the finance is also accounted in a standardized and equal way among the different countries. Last week, it was a full week of negotiations, very technical negotiations, but we also know very well that technical negotiations lead to some political discussions. And parties have met many times. They have proposed different texts with a lot of brackets. And now is the turn of the presidency to try to guide the discussion towards the end of this week. So unfortunately, we saw towards the end of the week that some countries are blocking a bit the ambition part, especially with regards to the urgency. So we have the IPCC report on 1.5, and the message is the strong results and the findings of this report are not being taken seriously by certain countries. And this is a concern because we don't have time to waste. So we hope that during this week there can be a higher push and this ambition can be strengthened in the text. But we know very well that ambition goes along with the finances, as I was saying before. So we think that what the impression here is that there will be some heated discussion on the final text of the COP and on this rule book. It's important to also understand that, yes, we need to have a rule book, but it cannot be any type of rule book. It has to really be centered with strong fundamental principles. And these principles are about human rights, are about the rights of indigenous people, are about gender equality. And unfortunately, we are seeing that these fundamental principles are also threatened and are used sometimes as bargaining chip when negotiating on other issues. So we hope that also this can change, and that the words that were put 3 years ago into the Paris Agreement text can become stronger and can become a better reality.
Thank you so much for that. And for all the participants, we just appreciate your patience and bearing with us. Apologies that they've sort of set up in a cubicle, as you can see. So we don't have the best setup, but we did want to bring a report from COP24. So just apologies as we have some of these technical and AV difficulties. So I'd like to invite Father Jostrom to share the position of of the Vatican in these talks, and what you see as the Holy See's priorities for 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maurice. The Vatican's participation at this conference has been a long journey. In the month of July at the Vatican, we had an international conference for the 3rd anniversary of Laudato Si. And one of the objectives, rather the main objective of that conference, was to prepare for the COP24. And a very precise objective was to raise ambition for the 1.5 degrees centigrade guardrail. And so there's been a journey we began in July. And at that conference also, Minister Kurti here, the COP24 president, was invited and he spoke at that conference. So we began a journey. Then as Vatican, we were present in San Francisco in September at the Global Climate Action Summit. Then in October in Bali at the meeting of the World Bank and IMF, and December now the COP24. Now Vatican's presence here, I would say, is at various levels. There is a very core delegation from the Vatican, headed officially by Cardinal Parolin. And let me say a word on this. You know, at the beginning of the conference, there were nearly 60 heads of states were expected, but unfortunately, only half of them turned up. So that was sort of a weak message from the conference. But the Vatican made it a point that the number 2, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, was personally present. And he spent in the entire 2 days here to send a very strong message to the Polish government hosting the COP24, to the entire world, that for the Vatican, this COP24 is very, very important. So he was there at the beginning. Then during the 2 weeks of the COP negotiations, first week was headed by Monsignor Autza, who is the ambassador of the Vatican at the United Nations. And from this week, from Sunday onwards, it's the delegations headed by Bruno Marie Dufay, the Secretary of the Dicastery for Integral Human Development. So and we are 6-7 of us as part of the delegation from the Secretariat of State to the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, someone from the Polish Church, and a couple of experts. So Vatican is strongly present. But that's just the one level of Vatican participation. At a larger, wider level, the Vatican represents the entire Catholic Church. We are 1.3 billion faithful around the world. And here again, at 2 levels, like Vatican is present, the Catholic Church rather, is present here through some very good movements, groups who in the church are working in the area of climate change and creation care. Just to begin with, the Global Catholic Climate Movement, which over months have been preparing for the COP24, and they are very, very strongly present here. We had Joanna, who spoke about the climate pilgrimage from the Vatican to Katowice, very symbolically from the Vatican to Katowice, and then so Global Catholic Climate Movement. And I also take this opportunity to thank them for their dedicated, committed, tireless, persistent work. And along with the Global Catholic Climate Movement, also CITSE is present. So with CITSE, so many organizations, CAFOR and many others. And we have so many of these groups present here, being a very vocal, even vociferous. They were also present for the protest last Saturday at the climate venue outside. They couldn't enter, but that also received a lot of attention. So it's a very strong presence here. But beyond that, the entire church is in some way involved. And thanks again to the Global Catholic Climate Movement and the Caritas, Polish Caritas, we managed to create a prayer campaign, sort of a prayer for the COP24, which is being said to begin with in Poland, in Polish, in over 10,000 parishes across Poland and in various languages around the world. So the church is present very strongly at COP24, praying for the success of the COP and creating awareness. A third level of the Catholic Church present is creating an ecumenical presence, and we are networking with with the Orthodox Church, for example. We had a very good symposium last Monday along with the Polish Academy of Sciences and the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. The Polish, the Orthodox Church was present in the person of John Chrysanthis, who is a theological advisor to Patriarch Bartholomew. Then the World Council of Churches is very much present here. So we are networking with all these churches here, also the Anglicans and many others. So as churches, we are nearly 2 billion. And also with other religions who are present, we are trying to dialogue. And the last level of our participation is, as Pope Francis invites us in Laudato Si, we are trying to dialogue with all people of goodwill, because earth is our common home. So we need to dialogue with everyone. So we are having a number of bilateral meetings over the last few days with several governmental national delegations from around the world. We are having sometimes one-to-one meetings. I just mentioned at the beginning of our webinar that we have had a very good meeting with the COP24 President, Minister Kurtikia. And it was a very, very fruitful meeting. So we are trying to dialogue with all people. And an important thing we did this morning, Julia mentioned that last Saturday there was a crisis moment at the end of the first week when Saudi Arabia, along with Kuwait and the US and Russia, took a position publicly that they don't want to accept the IPCC report on the 1.5 degrees centigrade. And that was a very difficult moment, because also, like, you know, which paradoxical, because the IPCC report was called by the UNFCCC after the Paris Agreement, after the Paris COP. They asked them to prepare this report, and when the report came, it's true that the message is very strong. It's alarming even to say, like, and now we say we don't want to accept. So it's interesting, like the rest of the COP assembly reacted very strongly, and we see that as a positive element. And so after that, along with the Global Catholic Climate Movement and SIDS and others, we said Vatican needs to take position. So we organized a press conference, which was held this morning. There was Monsignor Dufay, who spoke on behalf of the Vatican, along with somebody from Malawi, the African country, and Malawi, as we know, suffers, and she was narrating. What's the name of the person, Thomas? Mercy. And Mercy spoke very, very touchingly about how food security, how mothers, when they wake up in the morning, their first concern is how to feed their children. So, and she gave a very powerful testimony. And we had Joe from Samoa, who spoke about for the Pacific Islands, 1.5 is not just science, it's about survival. So our press conference was well received, and it was again a way of saying the Catholic Church wants the 1.5 degree limit to be mentioned, that be the guiding point of the Katowice agreement. So on the one hand, we see there is resistance, which is common, but my personal experience is that I see a lot of goodwill. And as Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, good will triumph. And that's the reason we need to strengthen our prayers, but then again, increase our trust in the Lord, increase our trust in the goodness of one another, that we will make this COP24, that this COP24 will be a historical conference of parties, where the Paris rule book was agreed upon, and humanity made use of, rose to the occasion, rose to the challenge of saving our common home for ourselves, for our brothers and sisters, especially the most vulnerable of our brothers and sisters, and also for the rest of the species, and especially for the future generations. And I conclude, just two, we had the plenary assembly, and Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, who is returning for the second time here, and he's scheduled to return also on Friday. So the United Nations is very much counting on this conference. And I would like to conclude with his words. He said he's got 3 grandchildren. And he said by the end of the century, he doesn't want his grandchildren to say that we didn't take care of our common home. So it is a huge, huge responsibility that we take care of our common home. also for our future generations, because Earth, we have this common good. It's not our heritage. We didn't merit it. We have taken it. We are indebted for it. And this is something we need to preserve for the future generations. Thank you very much for listening to us. And I just want to conclude saying that Vatican is, I can tell you also personally, we are very much committed to the success of COP24. And let's as all of us, as Catholic Church, Catholics, be united to save our common good. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your leadership. And I think we're all very grateful that you and others are there representing the Vatican and the global church in these talks and working to move us forward as a global society. So I would like to turn it over now to Tomas, looking at some of the next steps.
Yes. So good afternoon or good morning, everybody. Again, delighted to be sharing this panel with Josh, Julia, and Joanna. So in terms of next steps, I think this has become kind of a tradition, the live from COP webinar. This is our third. We started in Marrakesh, COP22. So we always conclude with this question of what's next, thinking of the year ahead. In each COP, we are reminded that governments are still not up to the challenge. They're not delivering. As Ziev Sanya likes to say, this is COP24, so it's the 24th COP, 24 years that governments have been gathering, and they're far from the level of ambition that is needed. Even if there's some positive signs, as Josh was saying, there are also lots of very negative signs, unfortunately. We're so far from the level of ambition that is needed to keep global temperature rise to 1.5. So the question is, what can we do here? We have 130 plus people joining from all over the world, wherever your continent is, wherever your city is. The question is, what can you do in your local community this coming year, given the situation in which governments are not delivering on the Paris Agreement? I think you probably agree that one of the big problems here is that even if public opinion, civil society knows that this is a problem that needs to be solved, the public wants action, governments are not feeling the pressure. That's the big problem, in my opinion, is that governments are not feeling the pressure from their citizens. And also, most importantly, it's that national governments, there's so many powerful interests blocking action that the local level, and this is a quote from Laudato Si, in Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, while the existing world order proves powerless to assume its responsibilities, it proves powerless to implement the Paris Agreement, it is local groups that can make a real difference. It is you in your parish, in your community, in your school, that can make a real difference, because you have the access to your local mayor or to your local city council or to your local parish priest or to your local bishop. You have the ability in your local level to make change happen. So we thought it would be useful to give a glimpse of those initiatives that are coming up for next year. There's a GCCM, we're working with our members and partners on a series of initiatives for 2019 to hopefully get much more, engage in much more transformative action as is needed, in line with the urgency of the climate crisis, in line with this urgency of the IPCC report, which has been this big issue of debate, which is ridiculous that we're debating this. We should all be hearing to the science, which is dramatically urgent, this call to action from the scientists. So to be concrete, what's coming up? What's next? What's new in 2019? A couple of things. I should mention, one of the most exciting initiatives that we're working on, we had some good meetings here with the dicastery and with some partners like the World Resources Institute. We have been, for a couple of months already, going through this conversation. We need to lead by example. The church needs to lead by example. We're calling for action. The church has become a very recognized advocate for climate action, but we're very far from demonstrating leadership with our own actions. I think we would all agree by looking at our parishes and dioceses and Catholic institutions of all sorts that we haven't really implemented Laudato Si inside the church yet. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of implementing Laudato Si, and starting with our own carbon footprints. We, the church, we have a massive carbon footprint. We have this huge set of buildings, 220,000 Catholic parishes, 150,000 Catholic schools, etc. I mean, universities, monasteries, convents, chapels, so many buildings that we have, and not only buildings, but also land. What are we doing to reduce our own carbon footprint to zero, or not even zero, negative? We have so much land that if we put all the lands of the church to work for good, to work for the climate, they could do so much good. So next year, we still don't have the launch date, but we're hoping to launch a new initiative, a new program to support Catholic institutions to green their buildings, to green their facilities, to manage their properties more sustainably. This is you might recall we have the Eco Parish Guide, but now we're taking it to the next level and with a much more comprehensive program. I don't have a lot of details to share yet. We're still in the preparation of that new program. Then we are working on, there's of course the Amazon Synod. That will be a big priority for next year. As most of you might know, Pope Francis is convening next October a synod on the Amazon and integral ecology and the role of the church in the Amazon. That will be that's an exciting development. It will be the first time ever that the global church will have a synod on integral ecology. This never happened before. So this will be a very interesting opportunity to spark conversations about how the church is responding to this call of Laudato Si, and of course it will have a spotlight on that region of the world, the Amazon rainforest, which is, with the recent Brazilian elections and the Bolsonaro administration taking over in January, which Bolsonaro has very shockingly promised to dismantle environmental regulations and open up the Amazon to basically destroy the Amazon and indigenous communities that are there in the front lines. So it will be very interesting to see how the church, through the synod, responds to this horrible, very worrisome situation in the Amazon. And given that the church will be having these conversations, we'll have a spotlight on the Amazon. In Lent, you might recall that we always put together a campaign during Lent. We'll have a strong focus this year on meat consumption. As you might know, meat is a big driver of deforestation in the Amazon. So, of course, also given the meatless theme of the long tradition we have of meatless Lents, that will be something that we'll be working on, and trying to connect the dots between deforestation, the Amazon, sustainable lifestyles, food, and of course the Synod and the Amazon. Second, there will be, for Earth Day, we're still in the process of finalizing the plans for Earth Day, but that will be, as you might recall, we have always two big global moments, Earth Day on one side and the Season of Creation, in which we'll be incorporating this Amazon themes. So expect more to come. We'll send an email as a follow-up to this webinar with a bit more information. Just for the sake of time, I'll have to keep it brief now. And then I would say and so the Amazon will be present throughout the whole year in the work we'll be doing. And hopefully that will be a useful theme for you to work in your communities. And then I would say another big priority for next year will be to continue take the fossil fuel divestment campaign to the next level. You might have seen that the fossil fuel divestment campaign is growing a lot. There are a lot of Catholic institutions that are divesting from fossil fuels. We'll continue that format of 2 moments in the year for 2 big divestment announcements. There will be a big divestment conference in South Africa in May that will be connecting the divestment campaign for apartheid, which was a very symbolic campaign, very successful divestment campaign, connecting it to the fossil fuel divestment campaign. So there will be a lot of momentum around fossil fuel divestment, the church taking a prophetic stance against the fossil fuel industry. As we all know, the fossil fuel industry is at the core, at the heart of the problem, and all these difficulties that we're experiencing here at COP, in huge part, are because of the very negative role that the fossil fuel industry is playing and their strong lobbying efforts undermining the Paris Agreement. So the divestment campaign is a very powerful way of countering that. We encourage you to work in your local level, to engage your diocese. There are lots of dioceses that are starting to divest. The divestment campaign is about a financial boycott to the fossil fuel industry, if you want. Not investing in companies that we know are not being ethical in caring for a common home. So these fossil fuel corporations that are pretty determined to undermining the Paris Agreement. So we encourage you to think how in your local context, in your local diocese, and your religious order or whatever Catholic community you participate in, how you could bring up this issue of the fossil fuel divestment campaign. There's a bunch of resources in our website. You can check our website. There's a lot of divestment resources. So please consider that. That's a very practical, easy way and powerful way of taking climate action. And then we're also looking into how to support action in the ground to stop fossil fuel infrastructure. We know that the fossil fuel industry continues to build new fossil fuel infrastructure, new coal power plants and new oil pipelines, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing in our global network and our global movement beautiful examples of many of you taking a stand, joining the local climate movement to stop those fossil fuel infrastructure projects. We will be looking into ways for enabling that and better supporting you to make that work happen in the ground, those connections with the local climate movement. And not only on the fossil fuel infrastructure side, also on the sustainable lifestyle side, there's so much that could be done. So we're definitely looking into doing more on that front. So that's a little summary. We'll be sending, as I mentioned, a follow-up email with more information about those key dates. I should mention that World Youth Day, I forgot this one. This happens next January, so that's around the corner. If any of you is going to World Youth Day, we have a big Laudato Si program in place that we've been developing with the Franciscans and many of our partners. If you happen to go to World Youth Day, or if you know anyone going to World Youth Day, check in our website, the World Youth Day program. It would be great if you join. And I think that's pretty much it. There's more. For the sake of time, I'll just stop here. But we'll be sending more information online. And last but not least, sorry, two little more things. We'll continue the Laudato Si Animators program. For those of you who have not done yet the Laudato Si Animators program, we encourage you to sign up. Check the website. As usual, we'll have 2 online trainings, one starting in March, and one starting in July, I believe, right, Marisa? So that, as usual, is happening. And as part of that, we started this initiative of the Laudato Si circles, these local Laudato Si groups in the ground that are starting to emerge. I think this will be one of the big priorities for next year. We encourage you to consider starting a Laudato Si circle in your local community. It could be in a parish, it could be in a school, it could be in your home, it could be anywhere. It's about local Laudato Si groups coming together in prayer with Laudato Si and rooted in the spirituality of Laudato Si. But also not only about prayer, but most importantly about action. These Laudato Si circles are all about community action. On one side, about discernment of how we're transforming our lifestyles, how we're adopting more sustainable and ethical lifestyles, but in the second place also about group action. What we know that as John Paul II said, an ecological conversion is a community conversion. We need a group. We need a group of people, a group of peers who are together with us in the same journey. So the Laudato Si circles are a beautiful way for that to happen. We just had earlier today a Laudato Si circles call. Again, in our website, you can find more resources about the Laudato Si circles. We encourage you to check the resources, and hopefully you can have that local Laudato Si group to drive meaningful change in the ground, which is what we're badly needing right now. So I think that's pretty much it, Marisa. Back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all of the panelists. And we're going to turn to questions. Any of our participants, we've seen a lot of conversation and questions coming up already in the chat box, so thank you so much for that. Please type additional questions there, and I'll be pulling some questions out to ask. I also want to mention in the chat box, a lot of you have been sharing some ideas of things that you're doing in your own communities or in your parish. We're really hoping to build up sort of a collection of these stories of where local communities have made changes and where dioceses and Catholic institutions have made changes so that we can start connecting people working on this worldwide and sharing these best practices. So any of you who have those stories, I'm going to type my email in the chat box, and we really encourage you to share those. So first of a fairly easy question, I hope, which is from Michael Tarian. Where is the press conference that the Vatican held today posted? Is there information that we can find on that online to share with others?
The press conference was held this morning at 10 a.m. at the European time. It was in the main COP24 press conference room. Now, we made a press release this afternoon and we sent it across to the Vatican. So I was under the impression it already went out today, and maybe it has not gone out. So we will follow up the issue and we will make sure that it goes out. And not just the Vatican, it's also being sent out by the CITSE and other agencies. So thank you for reminding us of that. And by tonight, at the earliest, we'll make sure that information goes out on the press conference which we had today. I might just add that this press conference was very crucial. It was a way of saying that the Vatican supports the 1.5 degree IPCC report, that we want this report to guide the COP24 agreement. And the underlying reason is the survival of the poor communities is at stake. And the Vatican wants to send a very strong, clear message that we are the Catholic Church, faith communities are for this. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question. We've mentioned that this has been a challenging COP, and Tomas, you talked a little bit about local advocacy, but I wonder if any of you see an opportunity for us to pressure governments, national governments, to be more engaged in this process, and if so, if you have some suggestions on how to do that, or where the pressure should be put.
I can give it a try. So it's very important to hold the governments accountable to their promises, and citizens have the power for calling out on who are doing, the countries are doing well and the ones that are not doing well, and especially for asking governments to raise ambitions. Citizens can engage in many different ways in any sort of advocacy and lobby push at national level. It's about engaging with communities, as Thomas was saying. It's about also following the different national plans that governments are developing. And it's very important to remind that the Paris Agreement was a bottom-up process. And it was a process that started with the voluntary pledges by governments. On the one hand, we could say that this was ended up in a good result. In the end, we had an agreement. But these pledges are not enough. So it's really time and high time for governments to really follow what science is saying and raising the ambitions. And I think that citizens have the power in sending these strong messages in many different ways. So it's about engaging at different levels, and all of us can really make a difference.
Great. Thank you. So another question that we've heard is, that's come up a few times now in the chat box, is what can be done to better pressure bishops and local pastors to take this on? Many of us don't hear about this from our community, and there's still far too many Catholics who aren't even aware of Laudato Si. So is there work that the Vatican's doing to help promote that? Is there work that those of us can be doing to help promote that? How can we continue to grow this message among the church hierarchy?
Thank you, Marie.
We just lost the volume. Oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good but also difficult question. It's been also our challenge, to raise awareness within the church, because somehow we find this very paradoxical situation that Laudato Si is so well accepted, paradoxically maybe more outside the church than within. Let me say, yesterday I went for a panel session around midday, and there was someone from the London School of Economics who managed to create sort of a fund of over 5.5 trillion into renewable energy, into investing in this area. And he told me, he said he was the main speaker at the event. He said yesterday morning he got up early, and he started reading Laudato Si. A professor at the London School of Economics. And I was thinking, how many of us in the church have really read Laudato Si? And maybe beginning with the bishops, priests, and also the faithful. So it's a long way to go, but I think, we see also signs of hope. Because also working at the Vatican, we see numerous initiatives springing up around the world. And I think one service we can do, because I also understand sometimes the local churches do not have resources or time or the facilities. So I think one thing we can do as Vatican is to create a forum where all these good practices are shared, so others can adapt it. There's no one universal standard. So we can make known these proposals within the church, proposals happening around the various parts of the world, of the church, and make them known, so people can come to know them, adapt them, and apply. And thank you for reminding. So one of our priorities as dicastery is to increase the level of awareness within the church, and not just very theoretically, but at the practical level, encouraging initiatives. And the season of creation Thomas mentioned, there's a lot we can do. If we are hoping from next year, the season of creation will become much more institutional from the 1st of September to the 4th of October. We have over a month where we can really get our communities, especially on Sundays, but also on other days. There's something like the octave for of prayer for Christian unity from 18th of January to 25th of January. This is also an ecumenical initiative. So at Vatican, with Thomas and many others, or with other churches, we are trying to make it an ecumenical initiative. And that will be one strategy. But we will keep on pursuing it, that we need to raise the level of awareness, the level of action within the church, in our communities, on implementing Laudato Si. Thank you.
And if I may I compliment that, Marisa, I think here there's a critical role for the laity, for us lay people, because the beautiful efforts from the dicastery need to be supported in the ground by each one of us. I think it's up to us. We know that Laudato Si and the environmental questions are pretty new to the church, and we know that the church is pretty slow to respond, and we know that for most bishops and for many priests, it might take some time, but it's up to us lay people to remind them about the urgency of this crisis. It's not, Laudato Si is not just another encyclical that we can wait for a couple of years or decades to sink into the life of the church. Here, we need Laudato Si to be adopted and implemented urgently, with dramatic urgency. And it's up to us, lay people, who are aware and who are committed, to knock the doors and reach out to our pastors and bishops and other Catholic leaders and offer our help and say we're here to help you implement the Pope's Laudato Si call. So I think it's really up to us to make that happen. Really, it won't happen otherwise. I mean, it would not go fast enough otherwise. We really need to help the Vatican. The Vatican is doing a lot, but they need to be reminded in the ground. So that's my take.
Thank you. And I'll also add to that and say not only is there work that we can do, but if you're concerned about not hearing this, in your own parish and in your own diocese, it's important to ask and remind that this is important. And if you do hear it, it is also important to reach out and thank the pastor or the bishop. It's a very sad but true fact that this is that this can be a divisive issue and that there are very loud voices trying to drown it out. And I know this from experience. My own pastor spoke about Laudato Si and climate change a couple of weeks ago, and mentioned the climate pilgrimage, and ended up with some very hostile reactions of people calling and yelling and angry that this was being talked about in the church. So, so to hear voices of support as well is very crucial, especially in certain countries such as the United States, and I'm sure some others as well. And a related question to this is, are there plans to work more on including Laudato Si in formation programs?
About incorporating Laudato Si in formation programs?
Yeah, seminaries or other,
But it allowed me to comment on your previous reflection, which is, I think, it's one of the challenges we face. How to communicate Laudato Si, because especially in some parts of the world, the United States, to an extent also in Poland, but also I think it's also all over the world. We have some people react to Laudato Si, they see it as a polarizing theme. I think the challenge is up to us to find a common narrative. Michael Cherian, who is taking part, who is from Chicago in our webinar, one thing I learned from him, and thank you, Michael, and I hope, Michael, you don't mind me quoting you, is of this narrative. And one element of this narrative is to show how it's really linked to our lives, especially the lives of our children, our grandchildren, our nephews and nieces. So a month ago, I was in Genoa giving a conference, and at one moment, remembering what Michael Cherian once shared with me, I just tried this exercise. I said, now let's all think, all of us are either parents, grandparents, uncles, or aunties. And let's think of the little children who are so dear to us, and think of the earth, climate change, other problems 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I found there was a moment of silence, and somehow the spirit in the hall changed as we connected to the lives of people. The same thing we can do connecting to the lives of poor communities around the world. The environmental justice, eco-justice dimension. Because most of the emissions come from the developed, rich world, and to people who are paying the price of people in the poor countries, Bangladesh, Kiribati, or Tuvalu, elsewhere. So the moral dimension. A third element of this common narrative we could find is the theology. Earth is not just real estate to buy and sell. It's God's own home with incarnation. We are moving towards Christmas, and God, as St. John says in John 1:14, God pitched his tent here on earth. Earth is sacred. So we need to bring in the theology of creation. So my point is, we need to build a narrative where all can feel at home and they feel involved. I think until we do that, it's going to be a challenge. And we cannot afford to wait. We need to get the entire church together. It's our common good. Now, the second question you asked about the initiatives is we do have, in Rome, we have the joint diploma on integral ecology among all the 9 pontifical universities and Athenae. It's going to the 2nd edition, very successful, lots of registrations, and similar initiatives are taking place around the world. And so I should say that things are better than last year compared to, in terms of these initiatives. So this is one thing which comes to my mind. And in Austria, they have a similar formation program. In Argentina, I am told they have. So, and maybe the one point I mentioned at the beginning, that Vatican, our dicastery, one service we could do is maybe to provide information on these initiatives around the world. That's again the service of the Vatican, to be at the service of the Universal Church. So we can provide this information so people can sign up for some of this formation programs. Also, taking inspiration from this, they can adapt and create their own programs elsewhere. So that's an area where we will work on. But I can say that some few steps we are taking in this direction of creating formation programs. The last word at the COP, one point the Vatican is making is that education has to come into the final document. Education is an important concern. How to educate ourselves towards the care of our common. Thank you.
Thank you. So I realize we're starting to get up close to the hour. We're at 11 o'clock. And so I'm happy to close it out. If the panelists have any final thoughts that anyone would like to share, I invite you to do so.
Do you want to, a final word from each? My final word would be, it's really up to each and one of us, each and one of you in your local community to drive the change that is needed. COP24, 24 years of COPs, I think this is, and we're still, the national governments are not there, even if we're doing the best we can to try to move them to get there. We know there are too many powerful interests blocking action, and I really hope that we can leave with a sense that it's up to me to lead change locally in my community. So that would be my takeaway. If we want to achieve this goal of climate justice, we need a massive movement in the ground driving the transformation that is needed. So looking forward for a busy year of local climate action in 2019.
So this space, we know very well that it's a very complex space, it's very technical, and it's not well understood from the outside world. I can tell you that staying 2 weeks in this space, it's really not easy, and it feels like completely being in another world. But at the same time, what is so empowering and what is powerful as well is to see the engagement of many different people, many different groups, and on the one hand, although we have stakeholders with different interests and not always with the right ones, there are also groups that are really trying hard for achieving climate justice. So although this is the 24th conference of the parties, so 24 years talking about it and negotiating about it, tireless and endless meetings, is still a very important space. I mean, the Paris Agreement is the first agreement ever that united 196 countries, and it was agreed in a consensus way. It was not perfect, and that's why we're here to make it better. But it's very important that citizens are engaged in the topic, and they can really push government and let them understand that this is not about money, it's not about interest, it's not about the most powerful, it's about our planet, and we don't have any other planets. And so the climate is a common good and needs to be protected, and those people who are fighting for the environment, they also need to be heard. So yeah, I do hope that towards the end of this week we will have a strong solidarity package, a strong rule book that can enhance the ambition for tackling the disasters of climate change.
Thomas and Julia shared. What I feel is of the importance of shared action. Earth is our common home, and the together we are, the stronger we are. And we have no other path. I mean, either we survive together, we flourish, it's probably a more positive word, we flourish together, or we perish together. So let's come together. And I think we also need probably to correct our own understanding and living of Christian faith. Sometimes we think Christian faith is, our salvation is something between me and my God. I save my soul, I save myself. It's not the Christian Catholic understanding of salvation. It's the salvation of the entire universe, of the entire cosmos, the entire humanity. So we will save ourselves when we will save the rest of creation, when we will save the rest of humanity, and not salvation in very abstract terms. Salvation is already now, here and now. When we lead people to this fullness of life, let me conclude with that's on Jesus' own invitation, John 10:10. Jesus who said, "I came so that you may have life, and life in all its fullness." So let's ensure that everyone has this life in its fullness that Jesus came to bring us. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you all for your presentations. To the participants, thank you so much for joining with us today. Tonight. I know we have people from joining from all over. I apologize that we did not get to all of the questions, but very much appreciate the robust discussion that happened in the chat box. We will be preparing a recording of the webinar to send around, and when we post it, we'll also include some of the resources that we discussed today, since people were eager to see some of those. And we all, I believe, look forward to to the coming year, to the work that will have to be done. But we know that that through the Holy Spirit, we will lead others to change as well, and through our work together, we can accomplish great things. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you panelists as well.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
God bless. Bye.